Following the first successful test of the atomic bomb, in 1945, Allied leaders met in Potsdam, Germany, and jointly issued a declaration calling for the immediate surrender of the Japanese Empire. Shortly thereafter, the press asked the Prime Minister of Japan to comment on the declaration, and in his answer he used the word mokusatsu. This word, like many Japanese words, drastically shifts in meaning depending on very subtle changes in context. It always has something to do with silence, but functionally it can be used to say something as formal as, I shall remain quiet on this issue until I have had time to carefully consider it, to a far more dismissive, that's not worth talking about. President Harry Truman was given a translation which was far closer to the latter, and because of it, decided there was no hope for a diplomatic solution and ordered the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This is considered the worst translation mistake in history, but is by no means the only one. There have been countless deaths, wars, and catastrophes that could have been avoided if human beings had been capable to effectively communicate between one language and another. Anybody who's had any experience in a multilingual environment knows the frustration of being unable to express your ideas to the people around you, to being unable to understand what people around you are saying. If you choose to learn a foreign language, you will probably spend the first few years saying things you never meant to say and understanding things that nobody ever said to you. So why don't we all just speak one language? One language that we all speak and we all understand, and there's no problems. It's a very rational idea. It stems from that great rationality of the Enlightenment that gave us so many advances in science and technology, in diplomacy and democracy. It is a very rational solution, and it is horribly wrong. It is indicative of the most pervasive error people have when they think about language. They imagine it's like a code. You have reality, you encode reality into a language, and then by changing that code to another language, you can arrive at the same reality. But language is not a code. Language is a tool for interpreting. It is a complex system of categorization, organization, and thought that allows us to perceive our world. It is a complex system, but human beings are not good with systems. It's true, the Enlightenment brought all of those benefits and many more, but with it, it brought pollution, climate change, habitat loss, colonialization, and a host of other downsides. We like to have things with one cause and one effect, but with a system, things are far more complex. However, all of the serious problems that we face as a species today are systemic in nature. And the most pressing of these, without a doubt, is the environment. For 200 years, perhaps 2,000 years, our response to the complexity of the environment was, and has been, to destroy it. We destroy the ecosystem, and then we do what we want. But recently, we've become aware of the fact that we are an integral part of the environment, and that in order to preserve our own welfare, we must preserve the ecosystem that we are part of. 200 years ago, we had a single solution. There was a very serious problem. Poor country, didn't have enough to eat. So they decided to choose one plant, the most nutritious plant that was possible, that could be grown anywhere in the country. And it succeeded. In the 1840s, 80% of all of the calories that were consumed in Ireland came from one species, the Irish lumper potato. Then blight came, and that led to the Great Potato Famine. 25% of the entire population of Ireland died. Another million people were displaced all around the world. One solution. It doesn't work well when you lose biodiversity. And that was one of the first cases where we realized biodiversity is linked to us. You would think that today we're doing better. We can eat about 7,500 plants. In the United States, we grow about 100 plants commercially, and out of those 100, only about 30 are widely consumed. 0.4% of the possible biodiversity we can eat, we are actually consuming. So, we need to do better with biodiversity. We need to protect it for our own good. But how do we do that? We have to study it. We have to understand those complex systems that we're not very good at. But each one of the ecosystems that I'm talking about is unique and diverse. Each one has so many minute details that scientists need to understand in order to understand how the biodiversity of each ecosystem works, and each system works with other systems together. It would take generations to learn this information. And we don't have it. But maybe there's a shortcut. Brings us back to our other system, languages. Languages are not a code, they are a system of categorization, organization, and thought to perceive the world that has evolved in a particular ecosystem depending on the intricacies of that ecosystem. So, we can access all of the information that has been cultured and grown and nourished in the language over generations and use it right now to understand it better. In southern Mexico, Guatemala, and Honduras, there's a language called Yucatec Maya. The people who speak it have a complex sphere in the spiritual sense where they see the entire interaction of man with animals, plants, and the earth as an operation to please the spirits. And in doing so, they've developed over 80 terms for the biodiversity of the soil alone. The microfauna and the microflora within those different types of soil interact with the animals, wild and domesticated, and plants, again, wild and domesticated, that humans use. And they use the ideas that are encased in their language to help heal the earth. This concept of applying language is especially important for biodiversity because biodiversity maps directly onto linguistic diversity. If you look at a map of the world and you exclude those parts which are not inhabited by humans, you find that every single place where there are more animals, more plants, and more fungi have more languages and greater variation within those languages. But the parallels between language and species variation are not limited to the geography. There's also the question of preservation. If you want to preserve biodiversity, it's not sufficient to say, it's illegal to kill this animal. And if you want to preserve a language, you can't say, this language is important. We need to save it. What you need to do is you have to have a habitat for it, a place where it can be nourished and it can thrive and it has a function. In Senegal, in the Basse-Casamance National Park, there are ancient mangroves. In the last 50 years, they were basically brought to the point of extinction. But the Senegalese government had a novel and radical solution that's brought them back. The people of the Mangagulak region speak a language called Dioli. And it doesn't follow the taxonomies of Western science, where we might follow an idea of morphology or family. They instead follow the questions of function. There are certain fish that are very small. And there might be what we call 3 or 4 species. But for them, there's one word for all of those that are too small to eat. And there's another group of fish that are called something similar to shepherd fish, because they allow fish that are with them to grow and survive when there are changes in currents and attacks by larger predators. Then you have other fish that are adapted to the local consumption and others that are better for trade. Allowing these people to apply their traditions that are defined by their language had an effect that was quite drastic. The Senegalese government gave a cooperative called the Kawawana the ability to define the regulations and also enforce them with the weight of law behind them. And the result is that now those ancient mangroves are coming back, both the plants, the animals, and especially the fish stocks. The local people have enough to eat, and they have a small amount that they're able to use to trade and get money that they need for their necessities. These are potentials that we see across the world. Right now, scientists are studying with indigenous populations and their languages in Borneo, Mexico, Papua New Guinea, China, everywhere we have biodiverse hotspots. There's a problem. As I said before, systems are complex. We don't know everything about them. And there are so many benefits to biodiversity that we don't know how many we're actually receiving until they're gone. When we destroy an ecosystem, we suddenly realize the horrors that we've brought upon ourselves. But we may be realizing that now. There's also the same thing that's happened with languages. Those languages can help you save biodiversity in particular areas, but they're also languages. They have cultures, stories, histories. Every single one is important. It gives you so much more than you'll ever be able to imagine until it isn't there anymore. There are between 6,000 and 7,000 languages in the world. And it is predicted that 90% of those will no longer exist by the year 2100. We lose another language every 2 months. Charlemagne said, if you know another language, you have another soul. When you learn a language, it allows you to see another world, to see a world from the eyes of a different point of view. And that allows you to solve problems that are practical, have more empathy and solve problems with other people. And this is not something you need to go to Borneo to do. You can study another language. It's hard. It'll be painful. I've done it. You'll make lots of mistakes. You don't have to study another language. Here, in TEDxCesena, you have a beautiful dialect. Learn Romagnolo. Study it. Practice it. Celebrate it. It is a wealth of knowledge and tradition and folklore that you could lose. We don't need one language. We need all languages. Thank you.